The hotel bar was almost empty at 11 on a Tuesday night. I sat at the far end of the polished mahogany counter, nursing a glass of cheap white wine I couldn't really afford, trying to decide if rock bottom had a basement. My phone lay face down beside my purse, 3 missed calls from my landlord glowing accusingly through the dark screen. Fired. The word still tasted bitter on my tongue, even 3 hours after my former boss had called me into his office with that look on his face. Budget cuts, Elena. Nothing personal. 28 years old, no job, 2 months behind on rent, and responsible for my 16-year-old sister who would be finishing her shift at the diner in an hour expecting me to pick her up like everything was fine. I took another sip of wine, the tartness making my eyes water. Or maybe that was just the reality of my situation finally breaking through the shock. Excuse me. The voice was feminine, refined, with the slightest trace of an Italian accent. Is this seat taken? I glanced up to find an elegantly dressed older woman standing beside the empty stool next to mine. She had to be in her late 60s, with silver hair styled in a classic chignon, and eyes that held both kindness and an unmistakable sharpness. Her cream-colored suit probably cost more than my monthly rent used to be. It's all yours, I said, gesturing to the seat. She settled gracefully onto the stool, her movements deliberate and practiced. The bartender materialized instantly, something that hadn't happened when I'd ordered 15 minutes ago. Campari and soda, per favore, she said, then turned her attention to me. You look like you've had a difficult day, Kara. I let out a hollow laugh. That obvious? I've seen that expression in the mirror more times than I care to count. She extended a perfectly manicured hand. Agnese Morozov. Elena Reyes. I shook her hand, noting the surprising strength in her grip. Morozov. The name tugged at something in my memory, but I couldn't place it. Her drink arrived, and she took a delicate sip before speaking again. Forgive me for being forward, but you have an honest face. I find myself in need of someone honest tonight. I raised an eyebrow. I'm not sure I'm the person you're looking for. I just lost my job, and I'm about 3 bad decisions away from living in my car. Perfetto, Agnese said, and I couldn't tell if she was joking. That means you have nothing to lose. Something in her tone made me set down my wine glass. What do you want? She studied me for a long moment, those sharp eyes taking in details I probably didn't even notice about myself. How would you feel about earning $20,000 for one evening's work? My heart stuttered. $20,000 would solve every immediate problem I had, would give Camilla and me breathing room, would buy me time to find a real job. It would also probably involve something illegal, dangerous, or both. What's the catch? I asked carefully. Agnese's smile was small and sad. I need you to pretend to be my son's fiancé for dinner tonight. Just a few hours, that's all. I stared at her. Of all the things I'd expected her to say, that wasn't even on the list. Your son's fiancé. See, there are business associates coming to dinner, people with traditional values who expect my son to be settled with a nice girl. She waved her hand dismissively. He's too focused on work, never brings anyone home. They want to arrange a marriage alliance with their daughter. I cannot allow this. Why not? The words slipped out before I could stop them. Agnese's expression hardened. Because the LeBlanc family are vipers, and I will not see my Severo tied to them through marriage to that girl who is as cold and calculating as her father. She caught herself, smoothing her features back into polished composure. You understand family, yes? You would do anything to protect them. I thought of Camilla, of the promises I'd made to our mother before she died 5 years ago. Yes, I understand. Then you understand why I must do this. She reached into her Hermes bag and pulled out a small card. The dinner is in 2 hours at my home. I will have a dress delivered to you, appropriate jewelry, everything you need. All you must do is sit beside my son, smile when appropriate, and convince the Leblancs that he is already spoken for. Your son knows about this plan? I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. Agnes's smile turned slightly mischievous. Severo will adjust. He always does. He is very good at improvisation in business. This is simply another business transaction. I should have said no. Should have finished my cheap wine, gone to pick up Camilla, and figured out my life like a normal person. But $20,000 wasn't normal, and neither was my current situation. What if I mess it up? I asked. What if they don't believe me? You have an honest face, Agnese repeated. And you're sitting in a hotel bar on a Tuesday night, drinking cheap wine and fighting tears. You know what it means to be real, to struggle, to survive. That authenticity is what we need. The LeBlanc girl is polished perfection, all practiced smiles and calculated charm. You will be the opposite. $20,000, I said, still not quite believing this was happening. For one dinner. Plus a bonus if you're convincing enough that they abandon their pursuit of the alliance. She pulled out her phone. I'll need your address for the dress delivery, and your measurements. An hour and a half later, I stood in my cramped studio apartment, staring at the most expensive garment I'd ever touched. The dress was midnight blue silk, elegant without being ostentatious, with a neckline that suggested sophistication rather than seduction. The shoes were Louboutin. The jewelry was simple but clearly real, and the clutch contained $500 in cash for incidentals. Agnese Morozov wasn't messing around. I'd called Camilla and lied smoothly, telling her I had a catering job tonight and wouldn't be able to pick her up. She'd been annoyed but accepted it, used to the erratic schedule I'd been keeping lately trying to make ends meet. One more lie to add to the pile I'd been building since our mother died. The car that arrived to collect me was a Mercedes, driven by a silent man in a black suit who opened the door without making eye contact. As we drove through Boston's streets toward the exclusive neighborhood where the Morozov family apparently lived, I tried to calm my racing heart. What was I doing? This was insane. I was about to walk into some mafia family's home and pretend to be engaged to a man I'd never met, all because his mother didn't want him marrying into another crime family. Because that's what the Morozovs were, I'd finally remembered. Severo Morozov was the name that occasionally appeared in the newspapers, always in connection with legitimate businesses and charitable donations. But everyone in Boston knew the rumors. The car pulled up to a massive brownstone in Back Bay, the kind of house that whispered old money and older secrets. Agnese waited on the steps, now wearing an elegant black dress that made her look like royalty. Bellissima, she said, taking my hands in hers. You look perfect. Now, before we go in, you must understand something about my son. He doesn't know about this, I stated. He knows there is dinner with the LeBlancs. He does not know about you. She squeezed my hands. Severo is a good man, Elena. But he is hard, closed off. 10 years ago, his father arranged a marriage for him. The girl betrayed him, took money to spy on the family for our rivals. Since then, he trusts no one outside our inner circle, especially not women. That's who you want me to convince I'm engaged to? I asked, panic rising in my throat. A man who doesn't trust women? I want you to be exactly who you are, Agnese said firmly. Real, honest, unpolished by our world. Let him see that not every woman is calculating, that not everything is a transaction, even if this is one. Before I could respond, the front door opened and a man in his 30s stepped out. He had to be over 6 feet tall, with dark hair that was just slightly too long and eyes the color of cold steel. He wore a charcoal suit that had definitely been tailored specifically for his frame, and he moved with the controlled grace of someone always aware of their surroundings. Severo Morozov was, objectively, one of the most attractive men I'd ever seen. He was also, quite clearly, absolutely furious. "Mama," he said, his voice a low rumble of barely controlled anger. What have you done? Agnesi's grip on my hands tightened. I have found you a fidanzata, my darling boy. Isn't she lovely? His eyes cut to me, and I fought the urge to step backward. This was a man who commanded through presence alone, who wielded power like a second language. Whatever softness his mother possessed, he had none of it. We need to talk, he said to Agnes, still not addressing me directly. Inside. Now. The LeBlancs will be here in 20 minutes, she replied calmly. There is no time for discussions. You will be gracious to Elena, you will play your part, and afterward we will talk about how I have saved you from a disastrous alliance. I don't need saving, he bit out. No? Agnes's voice sharpened. You were going to allow Dimitri LeBlanc to broker a marriage between you and his daughter. You were going to chain yourself to that family for the sake of business stability. I will not allow it, Severo. Not when I know what it will cost you. Something flickered in his eyes. Pain, maybe, or old anger. Then it was gone, replaced by cold assessment as he finally turned his full attention to me. And you are? He asked, his tone making it clear I was an inconvenience at best. I lifted my chin, refusing to be cowed. $20,000. Camilla's rent. Time to find a real job. Elena Reyes, your mother hired me to pretend to be your fiancé for the evening. I'm sorry for the deception, but I assume you're familiar with the concept of business transactions. The corner of his mouth twitched. It might have been the start of a smile or a sneer, I couldn't tell. How much is she paying you? He asked. That's between your mother and me, I replied. He studied me for another long moment, and I had the distinct impression I was being catalogued, assessed, filed away in whatever mental database he kept on people. Then he turned back to Agnesa. Fine, we'll play your game, Mama. But this discussion is not over. Of course not, Caro, she said serenely. Now go inside and refresh yourself. Elena and I will be along shortly. When he disappeared into the house, I let out the breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. He hates me. He doesn't know you well enough to hate you, Agnesi corrected. He hates the situation. There's a difference. She linked her arm through mine. Come, let me show you the house, and tell you what you need to know about the LeBlancs before they arrive. And Elena? Thank you. I know this is strange and probably frightening, but you're doing a brave thing. As she led me into the most opulent home I'd ever seen, all marble floors and crystal chandeliers, I wondered if brave was the right word. Desperate seemed more accurate. But I was here now, about to have dinner with Boston's criminal elite, while pretending to be engaged to a man who looked at me like I was a problem to be solved. What could possibly go wrong? The answer, I would discover over the next few hours, was quite literally everything. The dining room was obscene in its elegance. A table that could seat 20, set tonight for 8. Crystal that caught the light from the chandelier overhead and threw rainbow prisms across white linen. Silver that probably cost more per place setting than my car was worth. I sat beside Severo, acutely aware of the tension radiating from him. He'd changed into a black suit with the top 2 buttons of his shirt undone, a calculated casualness that somehow made him more intimidating. His forearm rested on the table near my hand. The sleeve rolled to his elbow, revealing a dusting of dark hair and what looked like the edge of a tattoo. You'll want to stay on my right side, he'd murmured as we'd taken our seats. I prefer to keep my dominant hand free. The implication was clear. Even at his own mother's dinner table, Severo Morozov was prepared for violence. Noted, I'd replied, matching his quiet tone. Should I be worried? That depends on how convincing you are. His gray eyes met mine. The LeBlancs don't accept failure gracefully. Agnes sat at the head of the table, positioned to orchestrate the evening like a conductor before an orchestra. Across from us sat 2 empty chairs, waiting for our guests. At the far end, a man I hadn't been introduced to watched everything with sharp, dark eyes. Yuri, Sevro's head of security, Agnese had whispered. He knows about our arrangement. The doorbell chimed, and my heart kicked against my ribs. Remember, Agnese said softly, you are in love with my son. You see past his rough edges to the man beneath. You are not intimidated by his world because you know he would never let it touch you. Before I could ask how she expected me to fake something so specific, Severo's hand covered mine on the table. His touch was warm, firm, possessive. I looked at him in surprise. Trust me, he said, low enough that only I could hear. If we're doing this, we do it properly. They'll be looking for cracks, for any sign of weakness. Give them none. I nodded, turning my hand to lace my fingers through his. His grip tightened fractionally, and something passed between us. Not warmth exactly, but a kind of understanding. We were allies in this deception, at least for tonight. The dining room doors opened, and Dimitri LeBlanc entered with his daughter Margot beside him. Dimitri was in his 50s, barrel-chested and radiating the kind of confidence that came from never having been told no. His suit was expensive but slightly too tight, his cologne overwhelming from 6 feet away. He looked like money, but new money, money that hadn't quite learned how to wear itself comfortably. Margot was 23 or 24, with the kind of calculated beauty that came from professional maintenance. Platinum blonde hair, designer dress, and eyes that assessed everything in the room like she was taking inventory. When those eyes landed on me, specifically on my hand intertwined with Severo's, they narrowed almost imperceptibly. "Severo!" Dimitri boomed, moving forward with his hand extended. "Good to see you, my friend. And Agnese, lovely as always." He kissed her hand with practiced charm that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Dimitri, Margot, welcome." Agnese gestured to the empty seats. "Please, sit. We have much to discuss tonight." "I see you've brought a guest," Dimitri said, his gaze settling on me with uncomfortable intensity. "Severo, you didn't mention you'd be entertaining company this evening." "Elena isn't company," Severo replied, his thumb stroking across my knuckles in what would look like an unconscious gesture of affection. "She's family, or will be soon enough." The silence that followed was profound. Margot's perfect composure cracked just slightly, her lips pressing into a thin line. Dimitri's jovial expression froze. "I'm sorry," Margot said, her voice clipped and precise. "Did you say family?" "My fiancé," Severo clarified, lifting our joined hands slightly. "I apologize for not mentioning it sooner. It's been a whirlwind, hasn't it, amore?" He looked at me, and I saw the challenge in his eyes. We were committed now, no turning back. "Completely unexpected," I agreed, finding my voice. "I certainly never thought I'd fall for someone like Severo. He's not exactly warm and fuzzy." Severo's lips twitched. "She keeps me honest." "How did you meet?" Margot asked, her tone suggesting this was an interrogation rather than polite conversation. This was the story Agnese and I had prepared during our brief time before guests arrived. Simple, mostly true, harder to poke holes in. "At a bookstore," I said. 3 months ago. I was reaching for a first edition Hemingway at the same time he was. He insisted I take it, then showed up at my apartment the next day with a signed copy. "Persistent," Dimitri observed, recovering his composure. He took his seat, Margot following suit with barely concealed fury. "That's our Severo. When he wants something, he doesn't give up." "Not when it matters," Severo agreed. His hand left mine to rest on my lower back, a possessive gesture that sent an unexpected shiver down my spine. Elena is worth being persistent for. Dinner was served. Course after exquisite course that I barely tasted, too focused on maintaining the illusion. Severo played his part flawlessly, touching me with casual possessiveness, finishing my sentences occasionally, asking about my day in a way that suggested this was routine, normal, real. I tried to match his energy, laughing at his dry observations, teasing him gently about his workaholic tendencies, all while hyper-aware of Margot's calculating gaze and Dimitri's increasing agitation. "So, Elena," Dimitri said halfway through the main course, "what is it you do? For work?" The question was a trap. He wanted to highlight the difference between his daughter and me, between their world and mine. "I was in event planning," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Recently decided to make a change. I'm exploring other options." "How convenient," Margot murmured, "that you're available just as Severo needs a companion." The implication was clear. She thought I was a gold digger, opportunistic, fake. "Margot," Anissa's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "That tone is unbecoming." "I'm simply curious," Margot replied, false sweetness coating her words. "It's so sudden, this engagement. You understand our surprise." "I understand that you expected a different outcome tonight," I said, meeting her gaze directly. My heart hammered, but I kept my voice level. "I understand that this disrupts whatever plans were in motion. But I'm not going anywhere, so I suggest we all learn to be gracious about the situation." Severo's hand tightened on my back. Approval or warning, I couldn't tell. Across the table, Yuri's expression remained neutral, but I caught the flicker of respect in his eyes. Dimitri laughed, a booming sound without humor. "Spirit, I like that. Severo, you've chosen well, though I must admit, this does complicate our business discussions." "How so?" Severo's voice was mild, but tension thrummed beneath the words. "Our business stands independent of personal relationships." "Does it?" Dimitri leaned back, swirling his wine. "I had hoped our families might unite in more than just commerce. Margot has always admired you, Severo, and such an alliance would benefit both our organizations tremendously." "I'm sure it would benefit yours," Severo replied. "Mine is doing quite well as it is." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. This was no longer a polite dinner. This was a negotiation, a power play, with me sitting in the middle of it like an unwitting pawn. "Perhaps," Agnesa interjected smoothly, "we should discuss business another time. Tonight is for celebration. My son has found love. Surely that deserves acknowledgement, regardless of business considerations." "Love," Margot repeated, the word dripping with skepticism. She turned to me. "Tell me, Elena, what is it exactly that you love about Severo? His charm? His warmth?" The sarcasm was thick enough to cut. I looked at Severo, at his hard profile and cold eyes, at the tension in his jaw that suggested he was one wrong word away from throwing everyone out. This man who didn't trust me, who saw me as a temporary inconvenience, who probably couldn't wait for this dinner to end so he could pay me off and forget I existed. "I love that he doesn't pretend," I said quietly, surprising myself with the truth in the words. Everyone else in his position would hide behind charm and practiced smiles. Severo doesn't. He is exactly who he is. No apologies. That kind of honesty is rare. Something shifted in his expression. His hand moved from my back to my shoulder, squeezing gently. "See?" he said to the table, his voice rough with an emotion I couldn't identify. "She understands me. Something you never did, Margot." Margot's face flushed. "We dated for 3 months when we were teenagers, Severo. Hardly enough time for you to try using me to get information for your father." He cut her off coldly. "Or did you think I'd forgotten that particular betrayal?" The dinner dissolved after that. Dimitri made excuses about early meetings. Margot stalked out without saying goodbye, and within minutes the house was quiet again, save for the soft clink of staff clearing dishes. I stood in the foyer, clutching the clutch purse that still contained $500 I hadn't touched, wondering if I should call for a car or just walk the 12 blocks home to clear my head. "Not yet," Severo said from behind me. "We need to talk." I turned to find him leaning against the doorframe, jacket off, sleeves still rolled, looking simultaneously exhausted and dangerous. "About?" I asked warily. "About how you just bought yourself a job for the next 3 months." My stomach dropped. "I don't understand." "Dimitri won't accept this," he said flatly. "He'll investigate you, try to prove you're fake, wait for us to slip up. If he succeeds, he'll push even harder for the alliance with Margot." My mother was right to be concerned, but one dinner isn't enough to convince him. "What are you saying?" He pushed off the doorframe, moving toward me with predatory focus. "I'm saying you impressed me tonight. You didn't break under Margot's interrogation, you held your ground with Dimitri, and you somehow made our engagement believable despite meeting me an hour before they arrived." "Your mother is paying me $20,000, I reminded him. I was motivated. "She's going to pay you $60,000, he corrected. $20,000 per month for 3 months. You'll move into the guest house on the property, attend events with me as my fiancé, and make this real enough that the LeBlancs give up their pursuit." I stared at him. $60,000. Enough to secure Camilla's future, pay off debts, start fresh. But 3 months of lying, of living in this world, of pretending to be engaged to a man who looked at me like I was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. "And after 3 months?" I asked. "We break up quietly. You leave with your money and your life. I stay free of Dimitri's manipulations. Everyone wins. Except you'll still be alone," I said before I could stop myself. His eyes hardened. "That's how I prefer it. Do we have a deal, Elena Reyes? Or do you want to go back to your studio apartment and late rent notices?" He knew. Of course he knew. Men like Severo Morozov knew everything about everyone they encountered. I thought of Camila, of the promises I'd made to our mother, of the chance to give my sister stability, security, time. "Deal," I said, extending my hand. He took it, his grip firm and warm. "Good. Yuri will collect you and your things tomorrow morning at 9. Welcome to the family, fidanzata." As I left in the Mercedes, the city lights blurring past the window, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just agreed to something far more complicated than a simple business transaction. Severo Morozov was dangerous. His world was dangerous. And I'd just signed up to live in the center of it for 3 months. Whatever happened next, there was no going back. Moving into the Morozov guest house should have felt like winning the lottery. The space was larger than any apartment I'd ever lived in, with a bedroom, full kitchen, and living area decorated in understated elegance. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked a private garden, and the bathroom had a tub deep enough to drown in. But luxury couldn't mask the reality that I was now living a lie 24 hours a day. "This is insane," Camilla said, spinning in a circle in the living room 2 days after I'd moved in. I'd finally worked up the courage to tell her a carefully edited version of the truth. "You're fake engaged to a mafia boss?" "He's not technically a mafia boss," I corrected, though we both knew I was splitting hairs. "And it's just for 3 months. It's a job, Cammy. A really well-paying job that means I can cover your tuition and we don't have to worry about rent." My sister fixed me with the look that made her seem much older than 16. "And what happens in 3 months when you break up with him? Won't that be dangerous?" "It's a clean break, contract style. I walk away. He stays free of a bad alliance." I tried to sound more confident than I felt. Besides, Severo doesn't actually care about me. This is purely business. "Does he know about me?" Camilla asked quietly. I'd wondered when that question would come. "Yes. He had me investigated within hours of our first dinner. He knows about you, about Mom, about our situation. Everything." "And he's okay with you doing this?" I thought about Severo's expression when Yuri had handed him my background file. The way his jaw had tightened when he read about Camilla, about our mother's death, about the promises I'd made. For just a moment, something had flickered in those cold gray eyes. Not warmth exactly, but recognition. Like he understood what it meant to carry responsibility you hadn't asked for. "He hasn't said I can't," I answered finally. The truth was, Severo and I had barely spoken since I'd moved in. He was gone most days, handling business I didn't ask about. When he was home, he worked in his study or the main house, keeping a careful distance. We'd established ground rules through Agnese. We'd appear together at social events, maintain the fiction in public, but our private lives remained separate. It should have been perfect. Professional. Clean. Instead, I found myself hyper-aware of his presence whenever he was near, tracking his movements through the property like my nervous system had developed a Severo-specific radar. "Dinner tonight," Agnese informed me on Friday evening, appearing at my door with an armful of garment bags. "Charity gala. Half of Boston's elite will be there, including people who know the LeBlancs. This is your debut as Severo's fiancé to wider society." She laid out 3 dresses on my bed. "Which one speaks to you?" I chose a deep emerald silk that somehow managed to be both modest and striking. Agnès had impeccable taste, and every piece she'd provided over the past week had fit perfectly, suited my coloring, felt expensive without being ostentatious. "Good choice," she approved. "It will complement Severo's gray suit beautifully. You'll look like a matched set." "That's the point, isn't it?" I asked. "Looking like we belong together?" Agnese's expression softened. "You do belong together, Kara. More than you realize. We barely know each other." "My son is a difficult man," she acknowledged, sitting on the edge of the bed. "His father raised him to be hard, uncompromising. And then Margot's betrayal when he was 24 taught him that vulnerability was weakness. He's been alone ever since, and he thinks that's strength." "What do you think it is?" I asked quietly. "Fear," she said simply. "He's afraid that caring for someone gives them power to hurt him. So he pushes everyone away, keeps himself isolated behind walls of ice and control." Her eyes met mine. "But you got past his guard at that first dinner, Elena. You saw him clearly and you didn't flinch. That's why I chose you." "You chose me because I was desperate and available," I countered. "I chose you because you have honest eyes and a brave heart," Agnese corrected firmly. "And because when my son looks at you, I see cracks in those walls. Small ones, yes, but they're there." I wanted to argue, to tell her she was seeing what she wanted to see. But I remembered the way Severo's hand had tightened on my shoulder when I'd defended him to Margot. The way he'd looked at me when I said I loved his honesty. Maybe Agnese wasn't entirely wrong. The gala was held at the Museum of Fine Arts, the building transformed into a glittering showcase of wealth and power. Severo arrived at the guest house at 7 to collect me, looking devastating in his gray suit with the jacket unbuttoned and a black shirt underneath that made his eyes even more striking. "You clean up well," he said by way of greeting, his gaze tracking over the emerald dress before meeting my eyes. "So do you," I replied, trying to ignore the flutter in my stomach. This was a job. He was my temporary fake fiancé. The attraction I felt was just a physical response to an objectively handsome man. Nothing more. "Ground rules," he said as we walked toward his car, a sleek black Audi that Yuri drove with the same silent efficiency he did everything. "Stay close to me. Don't wander off alone. There will be people there who'd love to use you to get to me." "Dimitri?" I guessed. "And others. The LeBlancs aren't my only rivals." He held the car door open for me. "But don't look nervous. You're my fiancé. You're protected. Anyone who touches you answers to me, and everyone knows what that means." The casual way he discussed violence should have frightened me. Instead, I felt an unwelcome sense of security, Whatever Severo was, whatever darkness lived in his world, he'd made it clear that I was under his protection. The museum was already crowded when we arrived, champagne flowing and conversation buzzing. Severo's hand settled at the small of my back as we entered, a possessive gesture that I'd grown used to over the past week. Every touch, every glance, every moment of manufactured intimacy was slowly becoming routine. That should have made it easier. Instead, it made it more dangerous. Severo, there you are. A man in his 40s approached, gin and tonic in hand. And this must be the mysterious fiancé everyone's been talking about. Elena Reyes, I offered my hand. Pleasure to meet you. Richard Hastings. I sit on the board with Severo. His handshake was firm, his smile genuine. You've caused quite a stir, young lady. Severo's been Boston's most eligible bachelor for the better part of a decade. Lucky me, then, I said lightly. Indeed. Richard's gaze turned speculative. Though I have to say I'm surprised. After the situation with ancient history, Severo cut him off, his voice pleasant, but with an edge that made Richard backpedal immediately. Of course, of course. Well, congratulations to you both. Elena, if he gives you any trouble, you just let me know. Richard winked and melted back into the crowd. What situation? I asked quietly. Severo's jaw was tight. Nothing you need to concern yourself with. If we're supposed to be engaged, I should probably know your history. He was quiet for a long moment, guiding me through the crowd toward a quieter alcove near the sculpture gallery. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. When I was 24, my father arranged a marriage to Margot. Our families had been business partners for years. It made sense strategically. We dated for 3 months, got engaged, planned a wedding. His hand dropped from my back, and he turned to face the sculptures rather than me. 2 weeks before the ceremony, I discovered she'd been feeding information about our operations to a rival family. Troop movements, financial details, security protocols, everything. What did you do? I asked, though part of me wasn't sure I wanted to know. I called off the wedding, ended the alliance between our families. Dmitri convinced my father it was a misunderstanding, that Margot was young and foolish and manipulated. My father wanted to forgive them. His voice hardened. I refused. And 6 months later, someone used the information Margot had provided to attack one of our warehouses. 3 men died. The weight of that history settled over me. I'm sorry. Don't be. It taught me a valuable lesson about trust. He finally looked at me, his expression unreadable. Which is why what we have works. We both know this is transactional. No feelings, no expectations, no room for betrayal. Just a business arrangement with clear terms. Right, I agreed, ignoring the small twist in my chest. Just business. Severo Morozov, as I live and breathe. The voice was smooth, cultured, and carried an undercurrent of mockery. We both turned to find Dmitri LeBlanc approaching with Margot beside him. Enjoying the festivities? Well enough, Severo replied evenly. Elena, you remember Dmitri and Margot? Of course. I moved closer to Severo instinctively. Nice to see you both again. Is it? Margot's smile was razor sharp. I've been hearing such interesting things about you, Elena. Quite the Cinderella story. From unemployed to engaged to one of Boston's wealthiest men in less than a month. Love works in mysterious ways, I replied, keeping my voice light despite the warning bells clanging in my head. Does it? Dimitri's gaze moved between us. I've always found love to be remarkably predictable, opportunistic even. Is there a point to this conversation? Severo asked, his tone dropping several degrees. Simply marveling at your good fortune, Dmitri replied. Finding love so conveniently when we were about to finalize arrangements between our families. almost as if someone orchestrated it. The accusation hung in the air. They knew, or suspected at least. My son doesn't need orchestration to find companionship. Anissa's voice cut through the tension as she appeared at my other side. He needed only to open his eyes to the possibility, something he's always been perfectly capable of on his own. Agnesa, lovely as ever. Dimitri's smile didn't reach his eyes. You must be thrilled about the engagement. Overjoyed, she confirmed. Though I believe the silent auction is about to close. Wouldn't want you to miss your chance to bid. It was a dismissal, polite but firm. Dimitri inclined his head and moved away, but Margot lingered for a moment, her gaze locked on me. Enjoy it while it lasts, she said quietly. Severo doesn't believe in happily ever after. Whatever you think you have with him, it's temporary. He'll use you up and throw you away just like he did me. The difference, I replied, matching her quiet tone, is that I'm not trying to betray him. Her eyes flashed with anger before she turned and stalked after her father. Well handled, Agnesi murmured approvingly. But she's right about one thing, Kara. This situation with the LeBlancs is escalating faster than I anticipated. They're not going to accept defeat gracefully. Meaning? Severo asked. Meaning they'll try to prove Elena is a fraud. They'll investigate her, follow her, look for inconsistencies in your story. Agnese's expression was grave. You two need to spend more time together. Actually get to know each other. Make this believable beyond surface-level appearances. We had a deal, Severo said. Professional distance. And I'm telling you that deal needs to change, Agnesi countered. Dimitri is suspicious. If he finds proof this engagement is fake, he'll use it to destroy your credibility and force the alliance with Margot. You need to make this real enough to withstand scrutiny. How real? I asked, my voice coming out smaller than I intended. Agnesi looked between us. Real enough that when people see you together, they believe you're in love. Which means spending time together beyond scheduled appearances. Actually talking. Learning each other's habits and histories. Becoming friends, at minimum. Severo's jaw worked, tension radiating from every line of his body. Fine, we'll adjust the arrangement. Good. Agnesi squeezed my hand. I'll leave you two to enjoy the rest of the evening. And Severo? Try smiling occasionally. You're supposed to be happily engaged, not attending a funeral. After she left, Severo and I stood in awkward silence. The sculpture gallery felt suddenly too small, too intimate. I'm sorry, I said finally. I know this isn't what you signed up for. Neither of us signed up for what this has become, he replied. But we adapt. That's what survival looks like. He offered his arm, a formal gesture that felt oddly old-fashioned. Shall we continue pretending, fidanzata? The night is young and we have an audience to convince. I took his arm, feeling the solid strength of him through the suit jacket. Lead the way. As we moved back into the crowded gallery, I caught sight of our reflection in a glass case. We looked perfect together, matched and elegant, every inch the power couple. But I knew the truth. We were two people playing roles, pretending at intimacy while maintaining careful walls between us. The question was, how long could we sustain that illusion before the lines between real and fake began to blur? Tell me about your mother. Severo's voice startled me. We were sitting in his study, 3 days after the gala, attempting to follow Agnese's directive to actually get to know each other. So far, we'd managed 15 minutes of stilted conversation about favorite foods and preferred music before lapsing into silence. Now he wanted to know about my mother. Why? I asked carefully. He set down the glass of whiskey he'd been nursing. Because when Dimitri investigates you, and he will, he'll find information about your family. I need to know what he'll find so I'm not caught off guard. Always strategy. Always calculation. Nothing personal. She died 5 years ago, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Breast cancer. Stage 4 by the time they caught it. She was a single mother. Worked 2 jobs to keep us fed and housed. Never remarried after my father left when Camilla was born. That's the factual summary, Severo observed. I can read facts in a file. I want to know who she was. I looked at him, surprised by the request. He leaned back in his chair, shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows, tie long since discarded, looking more relaxed than I'd seen him. Maybe that was the whiskey, or maybe he was actually trying. She was funny, I said slowly. Even when things were hard, even when she was exhausted, she'd find something to laugh about. She used to make up stories for us about the people we'd see on the bus, giving them whole, elaborate lives. The man in the gray suit was actually a spy. The woman with the shopping bags was a retired Broadway star. I smiled at the memory. It made our small world feel bigger. And when she got sick, his voice was quiet. She made me promise to take care of Camila, to make sure she finished high school, went to college, had opportunities Mom never had. My throat tightened. She was more worried about us than about herself, even at the end. Severo was silent for a moment. That's why you took this job. The money for Camilla. The money for both of us, I corrected. But yes, primarily for her. She's brilliant, Severo. Straight A's, wants to study engineering. I can't let her give that up because I lost my job and can't afford rent. You won't have to, he said simply. Whatever else happens, I'll make sure Camilla's education is covered. That's not part of our contract. It's a guarantee. I stared at him. Why would you do that? Because I understand responsibility you didn't ask for, he replied, his gaze holding mine. My father died when I was 26. Left me an empire I wasn't ready for. A family I had to protect. Decisions that would affect hundreds of people. I wanted to be an architect. Build things that mattered. Instead, I inherited a legacy of violence and compromise. It was the most personal thing he'd ever shared with me. Do you regret it? Every day, he admitted. But regret doesn't change reality. Neither does wanting a different life. You do what needs to be done, protect who needs protecting, and hope you don't lose yourself completely in the process. Is that what you think is happening? That you're losing yourself? His laugh was hollow. I lost myself a long time ago, Elena. Now I'm just managing what's left. The bleakness in his voice made my chest ache. I don't think that's true. No? He refilled his glass. You've known me 2 weeks. What could you possibly know about who I am? I know you kept your mother's dinner theater tradition alive even though you'd rather work, I said. I know you personally funded a scholarship program for underprivileged kids in South Boston. I know you visit the graves of the men who died in that warehouse attack every month. Yuri told me. Severo's expression darkened. Yuri talks too much. He cares about you, I corrected. And he's worried you've forgotten how to let anyone see the man you actually are underneath all the armor. The armor is all that's left, Severo said flatly. The man underneath died with my father's empire and Margot's betrayal. What you see now is what there is. I don't believe that. Believe what you want. He stood abruptly. This was a mistake. We don't need to know each other's tragic backstories to fake an engagement. We just need to perform convincingly in public. Severo. Good night, Elena. He left before I could respond, the door closing with controlled precision that was somehow worse than a slam. I sat alone in his study, surrounded by leather-bound books and expensive art, and wondered if Agnes was wrong. Maybe Severo's walls weren't just cracked. Maybe they were reinforced steel, impenetrable. And I was foolish to think I could see through them. The next morning, Camilla showed up at the guest house before school, her expression worried. Someone was asking about you at the diner, she said without preamble. Man in an expensive suit, asking Raj if you had any enemies, if you'd been in trouble with anyone. My stomach dropped. What did Raj say? That you were a model employee who never caused problems. But Elena, who is this guy? Why is he asking questions? It's nothing, I lied, pulling her into a hug. Just someone being nosy about my new situation. It's fine. She pulled back, skepticism written across her face. Are you in danger? Because if this fake engagement thing is putting you at risk. It's not, I promise. Another lie. But what was I supposed to tell her? That a rival crime family was investigating me, looking for leverage? Just be careful, okay? Don't talk to strangers about our family. After she left for school, I found Yuri in the main house kitchen. Dimitri's having me followed, I said. We know. 2 men, rotating shifts. They're not very subtle. He poured coffee with the same efficiency he did everything. Severo's aware. He has counter-surveillance in place. Why didn't anyone tell me? Yuri's dark eyes met mine. Because you'd worry, and worry makes people act differently. Dimitri's looking for proof you're not who you claim to be. The best defense is to be exactly who you appear to be. A woman in love with Severo Morozov. Except I'm not, I pointed out. This is all fake. Is it? Yuri asked mildly. Because from where I'm standing, you're the only person in years who's gotten past Severo's guard. He talks to you, shares things with you. That's real, even if the engagement isn't. He walked out on our conversation last night. Because you got too close to something true, Yuri replied. Severo doesn't know how to handle genuine connection anymore. Margot's betrayal broke something in him, but you're the first person since then who makes him want to try fixing it. Before I could respond, Severo appeared in the doorway. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept, his hair slightly disheveled and his shirt wrinkled. We have a problem, he said without preamble. Dimitri's calling a meeting of the families. He's demanding I prove the engagement is legitimate or step aside on a major business decision. What kind of proof? I asked. Documentation, history, evidence that we've been together longer than 3 weeks. His jaw was tight. He's going to try to expose us. So we give him what he wants, I said, my mind already working through possibilities. We create a history, photos, receipts, witnesses. We backdate our relationship to make it more believable. Severo looked at me with something like respect. That's essentially fraud. And this whole arrangement isn't? I countered. We're already lying. We just need to make our lies more convincing. There's a difference between performing and fabricating evidence, Yuri interjected. The latter carries legal risks. Not if we're smart about it, I argued. Not if we use enough truth to make the lies hold up. Severo studied me for a long moment. You're suggesting we commit to this more completely. I'm suggesting we win, I corrected. You said adaptation is survival, so let's adapt. A slow smile spread across his face, the first genuine one I'd seen from him. It transformed his features, made him look younger, less burdened. You're more devious than you look, Elena Reyes. I prefer strategic, I replied, returning his smile. So, how do we do this? How do we create a convincing history in less than 2 weeks? Agnesi appeared behind Severo, somehow having materialized from nowhere. You spend every waking moment together. You create memories, inside jokes, shared experiences. You make the lie so real that even you start to believe it. That's dangerous, Severo said, his smile fading. More dangerous than losing to Dimitri? She countered. More dangerous than being forced into an alliance that will destroy you? He looked at me, and I saw the question in his eyes. Was I willing to take this risk? To blur the lines between real and fake until neither of us was sure which was which? I thought of Camilla, of the promises I'd made, of the life I could give her with $60,000 and Severo's guarantee of her education. I thought of the man standing before me, broken and guarded, who'd offered me a lifeline when I needed it most. "I'm in," I said firmly. "Whatever it takes." Severo nodded once. "Then we start now. Clear your schedule for the next 2 weeks. You're about to become an expert on Severo Morozov, and I'm about to learn everything there is to know about Elena Reyes." "Is that a threat or a promise?" I asked lightly. His eyes darkened with something I couldn't quite identify. With me, they're often the same thing. 2 weeks of intensive bonding turned out to be more complicated than I'd anticipated. Severo took the project seriously, creating a schedule that would have impressed a military strategist. Mornings we spent together over coffee, sharing childhood stories and learning each other's mannerisms. Afternoons, we attended his business meetings where I sat beside him, observing, becoming familiar with his world. Evenings, we had dinner together, sometimes in restaurants where we could be seen, sometimes at home where we could talk without performance. And slowly, terrifyingly, the lines between fake and real began to blur. "You bite your lip when you're thinking," he observed one morning, watching me over his espresso. "Lower left corner. You've done it 3 times since we sat down." "You tap your ring finger on the table when you're impatient," I countered. 4 times in the last 5 minutes. What are you impatient about?" "This." He gestured between us. "I don't like waiting to see if our strategy works." We were in a cafe in the North End, deliberately choosing a spot where we'd be seen by mutual acquaintances, creating our history, building our story. Severo had arranged for someone to accidentally take photos of us that would later be leaked to society pages, backdated to months ago. "It's working," I assured him. "We look natural together now. Even Yuri said we've stopped performing and started just existing around each other." "Is that what we're doing? Existing?" His gray eyes searched my face. "Because it feels like something else." My breath caught. "Like what?" "I haven't decided yet," he admitted, which is unusual for me. I always know exactly what a situation is, how to control it. But with you... He trailed off, shaking his head. "You make things complicated." "I'm literally the simplest arrangement you could have," I pointed out. "No expectations, clear terms, defined end date. That's the problem." He leaned forward, his voice dropping. "None of this feels simple anymore." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. Camilla's name flashed across the screen, but when I answered, it wasn't her voice. "Elena Reyes?" The man's voice was smooth, cultured, unmistakably threatening. "This is Dimitri LeBlanc. I believe we need to have a conversation." Ice flooded my veins. Across the table, Severo's expression hardened as he read my face. "How did you get my sister's phone?" I asked, keeping my voice steady through sheer force of will. "Camila and I just had a lovely chat," Dimitri replied. "She's a bright girl. Mentioned how sudden your engagement to Severo was, how she'd never even heard of him before 3 weeks ago. Fascinating, isn't it? The things people reveal when they're not expecting interrogation. If you touched her..." My voice shook with rage. "Please, I'm not a monster. She's perfectly safe, for now." The threat was implicit. "But I suggest you and Severo meet me tonight, 8 o'clock, the warehouse on Harbor Street. Come alone, or I'll have more questions for your baby sister." The line went dead. "What did he say?" Severo demanded. I told him, my hands trembling around the phone. "He talked to Camilla. He knows she didn't know about our engagement before it happened. Severo, if he hurts her..." "He won't." Severo's voice was hard as granite. "We'll meet him tonight, but not alone. And Elena, I need you to trust me. Whatever happens, Whatever I say or do, trust that I'm protecting you both. What are you planning? To end this. He stood, throwing cash on the table. Dmitri made a mistake going after your family. That breaks every code we operate under. He just gave me justification to do whatever I need to do. The warehouse was exactly as ominous as expected. Crumbling brick, broken windows, the smell of salt water and decay from the harbor beyond. Severo parked a block away, Yuri in the car behind us with 3 other men I didn't recognize. You stay in the car, Severo ordered. This isn't negotiable. He wants both of us there, I argued. If I don't show, then I tell him you refuse to be intimidated by his tactics. His hand cupped my face, surprising me with the gentleness. Elena, listen to me. Dmitri is dangerous because he has nothing to lose. I need you safe. That's all that matters. And Camila is already secure. I had Yuri collect her from school an hour ago. She's at the house with Agnesi. He saw my expression and continued, I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner, but I needed you focused, not panicked. Relief made my knees weak. She's really safe. She's really safe, I promise. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead to mine in a gesture of intimacy that felt startlingly real. Stay in the car. Let me handle this. He left before I could argue further, Yuri and the other men following at a discreet distance. I watched them disappear into the warehouse, every instinct screaming at me to follow, to see what happened, to make sure Severo came back out. Minutes ticked by with excruciating slowness. Then I heard voices, muffled by distance and walls, rising in anger. A crash, shouting, the unmistakable sound of violence. I couldn't stay in the car. I moved as quietly as possible through a side entrance, following the sound of confrontation. The warehouse interior was a maze of crates and shadows, lit dimly by failing overhead lights. I crept closer to where I could hear Dmitri's voice, loud and furious. You think you can make a fool of me, Severo? Parade some nobody around as your fiancé when everyone knows she's a fraud? Careful how you speak about my wife. Severo's voice was deadly calm. Elena might be willing to tolerate your existence. I'm not. Wife? Dmitri laughed. Please, you're not married. This is all a show, and I have proof. Do you? Severo sounded almost bored. Because from where I'm standing, you have nothing but accusations and wounded pride. Margot was never going to be my wife, Dmitri. Accept it and move on. You humiliated my daughter, rejected her for a waitress. Do you know what that does to our family's reputation? I don't particularly care, Severo replied. What I care about is that you threatened Elena's sister. That crosses a line. And what are you going to do about it? Dmitri's voice turned mocking. You're not your father, Severo. You don't have his ruthlessness, his willingness to do what needs to be done. You've gone soft. The silence that followed was more terrifying than any response. You're right, Severo said finally. I'm not my father. I'm worse. He had rules, boundaries he wouldn't cross. I have none. Not when it comes to protecting what's mine. Brave words, but I have connections too. Resources. You can't just... Can't I? Severo's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper I had to strain to hear. Everyone in this city knows what happened to the last person who threatened my family. Do you really want to test whether I'm bluffing? I couldn't see what was happening, but I heard Dmitri's sharp intake of breath, the shuffle of feet, the tension crackling through the air. This isn't over, Dmitri said, but his bravado had cracked. Yes, it is. Severo's voice carried absolute finality. You're going to leave Boston. Tonight. Take Margot and whatever assets you can salvage and go. If I ever hear that you've contacted Elena or her sister again, if I even suspect you're thinking about retribution, I won't be having a conversation. I'll be having a funeral. Your choice. Footsteps approached my hiding spot. I pressed back against the crates, praying the shadows would conceal me. Dimitri passed within feet of me, his face pale and furious, two men flanking him as he stalked toward the exit. When they were gone, I emerged from my hiding place to find Severo leaning against a crate, looking exhausted. Blood trickled from a cut on his lip, and his knuckles were bruised. "I told you to stay in the car," he said without looking at me. "I don't follow orders well," I replied, moving closer. "Are you hurt?" "Nothing serious." He finally met my eyes, and what I saw there made my breath catch. Not coldness, not control, but raw emotion he was barely containing. "He could have hurt you. If you'd been here earlier, if you'd gotten caught in the middle." "But I wasn't," I interrupted. "I'm fine. Camilla's fine. You protected us." "That's my job," he said roughly. "That's what I do." "No." I stepped closer, reaching up to touch his face gently. "That's what you chose to do. There's a difference." His hand covered mine, holding it against his cheek. "Elena, I need you to understand something. What we have, this arrangement, it stopped being fake for me somewhere along the way. I don't know exactly when, but it did, and I don't know what to do with that." My heart hammered against my ribs. "When did you realize?" "When Dimitri called. When I heard the threat in his voice and every protective instinct I have went into overdrive." His other hand moved to my waist, pulling me closer. "When I knew I would burn this entire city down to keep you and Camilla safe. That's not acting, Elena. That's real. Severo." "I'm not asking you to feel the same way," he continued. "I know our deal. I know you're here for the money, for Camilla's future, but I needed you to know the truth before this goes any further." I looked up at him, at this man who'd started as a stranger, become my fake fiancé, and somehow transformed into someone I couldn't imagine my life without. The man who'd protected my sister without being asked, who'd shared his painful history with me, who'd let me see past his armor to the broken, lonely person underneath. "You're right," I said softly. "Our deal was fake. Was. Past tense." Hope flared in his eyes. "Meaning?" "Meaning I stopped acting too." I reached up, pulling him down so I could kiss him properly. Not for show, not for cameras, but because I wanted to. Because somewhere in the past 2 weeks, Severo Morozov had become the person I thought about first in the morning and last at night. Because protecting what's yours goes both ways. He kissed me back like a drowning man finding air, his arms wrapping around me with fierce possession. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. "What do we do now?" he asked. "We stop pretending," I replied. "We make this real. All of it. Elena, my world is dangerous. You've seen a fraction of it tonight. If you stay with me, if this becomes real, there will be more nights like this. More threats, more violence, more of you," I interrupted. "That's what I want. Not your money, not your protection. Though both are nice. Just you." "You're sure? Because once we cross this line, I'm not letting you go. I don't know how to do this halfway." "I'm sure." I kissed him again, softer this time. "I've been sure for days. I was just waiting for you to catch up." His laugh rumbled through his chest, devious and patient. I should have known. We drove back to the house in comfortable silence, his hand linked with mine, both of us processing the shift that had occurred. When we arrived, Agnese took one look at us and smiled. "Finally," she said. "I was beginning to think you'd never figure it out." "You knew," Severo accused. "I'm your mother. I always know." She kissed us both on the cheek. "Camilla's in the guest house, waiting for her sister. Elena, go reassure her. Severo, you and I need to discuss what happened with Dimitri." I found Camilla pacing in my living room, relief flooding her face when I entered. Elena, Severo's guy just showed up at school and said I needed to come here immediately. What's going on? I explained as much as I safely could, watching her process the information with wide eyes. So you're not fake engaged anymore? She asked finally. No, it's real now. The words felt strange and wonderful in my mouth. Is that okay with you? She threw her arms around me. Are you happy? Yeah, I said, surprised by how true it was. I really am. Then it's okay with me. She pulled back, serious now. But if he hurts you, I don't care how powerful he is. I'll find a way to destroy him. I laughed, hugging her tighter. Deal. The knock came at dawn. I woke in Severo's bed, tangled in sheets and his arms, morning light just beginning to filter through the curtains. We'd talked until almost 3, mapping out what our real relationship would look like, what boundaries we needed, how to protect Camila while integrating her into this strange new world we were building together. The knocking grew more insistent, followed by Yuri's urgent voice. Severo, we have a situation. He was out of bed instantly, pulling on pants and a shirt with practiced efficiency. Stay here, he told me, but I was already reaching for the robe he'd given me last night. Not a chance. We found Yuri in the hallway, his expression grave. Dmitri didn't leave Boston. My stomach dropped. What? He's called a meeting of all the families. Tonight. He's claiming Severo threatened him with violence to cover up a fraudulent engagement. He's demanding the council arbitrate. The council? I asked. Representatives from Boston's major families, Severo explained, his jaw tight. They settle disputes, maintain order, prevent open war. If Dmitri convinces them our engagement is fake, he can force consequences. What kind of consequences? The kind that could destabilize everything I've built, he replied. The council values truth above all else. If they believe I've been lying to manipulate family alliances, they could strip my voting rights, freeze my assets, even force a marriage alliance to restore balance. To Margot, I breathed. Probably. He ran a hand through his hair. Dimitri's playing a dangerous game, but he's not wrong about the deception. We did fake the engagement initially. If he has proof, then we show them proof it's real now, I interrupted. We go to this meeting and we tell the truth. The whole truth. Severo looked at me. The truth means exposing why we started this. It means admitting to manipulation of family alliances. That could carry serious consequences, Elena. What's the alternative? Lie more? That just proves his point. She's right, Agnes said, appearing at the top of the stairs. She'd clearly been listening. The council respects honesty, even painful honesty. Tell them how this started, yes, but also show them what it's become. Show them that what began as strategy has transformed into genuine feeling. And if they don't believe us? I asked. Then we deal with the consequences together, Severo said firmly, taking my hand. But Elena, you need to understand what you're walking into. The council isn't gentle. They'll question you harshly, look for any inconsistency, any sign you're still performing. Are you prepared for that? I thought about the past 2 weeks, the conversations, the shared silences, the way he'd defended my sister without hesitation, the way I'd stopped seeing him as a job and started seeing him as someone I wanted to wake up next to every morning. I'm prepared, I said, because what we have is real, Severo. Let them try to prove otherwise. The meeting was held in a private room at one of Boston's oldest gentlemen's clubs, the kind of place that smelled of cigars and old money. 7 representatives sat around a mahogany table, 5 men and 2 women, all watching with expressions ranging from curious to hostile as Severo and I entered. Dmitri sat at one end, Margot beside him, both looking vindictively satisfied. Severo Morozov, the oldest man intoned. "You stand accused of fabricating an engagement to manipulate family alliances and avoid legitimate business arrangements. Dimitri LeBlanc claims he has evidence this engagement is fraudulent. How do you respond?" Severo's hand tightened on mine. "The engagement began as a strategic arrangement," he said clearly. "My mother hired Elena to pose as my fiancée to prevent an unwanted alliance with the LeBlanc family." Murmurs rippled through the council. Dimitri smiled triumphantly. "However," Severo continued, his voice steady, "what began as strategy became real. Over the past month, I've come to know Elena, to trust her, to care for her in ways I haven't cared for anyone since my first engagement ended in betrayal." "Pretty words," Dimitri scoffed. "But where's the proof? Where's the evidence this is anything more than continued deception?" "You want proof?" I asked, surprising myself with the strength in my voice. All eyes turned to me. "You want evidence that what Severo and I have is real? Fine. Let me tell you what I know about the man I'm going to marry." I stood, facing the council directly. "Severo Morozov visits the graves of 3 men who died in a warehouse attack 10 years ago. He goes every month on the 14th, which was the day it happened. He brings flowers and he sits there for exactly 30 minutes, no matter what other obligations he has. He does this because he feels responsible for their deaths, even though the attack was orchestrated by someone else's betrayal." Severo's sharp intake of breath told me he hadn't expected me to know that. He pretends to hate his mother's dinner theater tradition, but he's kept every playbill she saved since he was 16. They're in a drawer in his study, organized chronologically. He funded an entire scholarship program for underprivileged kids in South Boston, but he refuses to put his name on it because he says he doesn't do charity for recognition. I turn to look at him. He takes his coffee black with 1 sugar, but only in the morning. In the afternoon, he switches to espresso. He reads poetry before bed, even though he tells everyone he only reads business journals. He has nightmares about his father's death, and when he wakes up from them, he goes down to the kitchen and makes tea with too much honey, because that's what his mother used to do when he was scared as a child. The room was silent. "I know these things," I continued, "because over the past month I've watched this man. I've learned his patterns, his habits, his fears. I've seen him at his worst and his best. I've seen him threaten violence to protect my sister, and I've seen him gentle enough to make that same sister laugh over dinner. Yes, our engagement started as a transaction, but it's not anymore. And if you can't see that, if all you see is manipulation, then you're not looking closely enough." "Miss Reyes," one of the councilwomen spoke, her voice thoughtful. "These details are convincing, but couldn't they have been learned through observation and reported to you by others?" "They could," I agreed. "Except I also know that when Severo was 8, he wanted to be an architect. He used to build elaborate structures out of whatever he could find, imagining buildings that would change cities. He gave that dream up when his father needed him to join the family business. And sometimes, late at night when he thinks no one's watching, he still sketches buildings on the margins of his business reports." Severo's face was unreadable, but I saw his throat work as he swallowed hard. "I know he blames himself for not seeing Margot's betrayal sooner," I continued. "I know it broke something in him, made him believe he could never trust his own judgment about people. I know he's been alone not because he wants to be, but because he's terrified of being hurt again." I moved closer to him, taking both his hands in mine. "And I know that despite all of that fear, despite every wall he's built, he chose to trust me. Not because I was convenient or strategic, but because somewhere along the way, we both realized that what we had was worth the risk of being hurt. That's what real looks like. That's what love looks like." "Love," Dimitri said mockingly. "Convenient that you discover these feelings just when you're being questioned about their authenticity." "Actually," Severo said, his voice rough with emotion, "it's inconvenient as hell. Loving Elena complicates everything. It makes me vulnerable in ways I swore I'd never be again. It means I can't make purely strategic decisions anymore, because I have to consider how they'll affect her and her sister. It means I'm choosing her over business advantages, over family alliances, over everything I've been taught should matter most. He turned to the council. You want to know if this engagement is real? It's more real than anything else in my life. And yes, it started with deception. But the truth is, standing here with me, willing to face this council, willing to expose herself to scrutiny and potential consequences because she believes in what we've built together. Then prove it, Dmitri challenged. If this engagement is so real, make it legal. Marry her. Right now, in front of all of us. Or admit this is still just performance. The room erupted in conversation. Several council members objected to the demand as excessive, but Dmitri pressed his point. A real engagement leads to marriage, he argued. If Severo is telling the truth, if he truly loves this woman, there should be no hesitation. If he hesitates, we know he's still lying. It was a trap, beautifully constructed. Either Severo called his bluff and we married immediately, binding ourselves legally before we were ready, or he refused and confirmed Dmitri's accusations of fraud. Fine, Severo said, his voice cutting through the chaos. We'll marry today. Right now, if that's what it takes to satisfy you. Severo, I started, but he turned to me, his eyes intense. Elena, I know this isn't how you imagined this happening. I know it's rushed and pressured and far from romantic. But I meant what I said. You're the most real thing in my life. If marrying you today means ending this circus and protecting what we have, then that's what we'll do. And if I say no? I asked quietly. If I tell you this is crazy, that we should wait? Then we wait, he replied without hesitation. And I'll deal with whatever consequences Dmitri wants to throw at me. But Elena, understand this. I want to marry you. Not because of his ultimatum, not to win this political game. Because I love you, and I'm done pretending otherwise. My heart felt too large for my chest. This man, this complicated, damaged, fierce man, was offering me everything. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. You love me, I repeated, needing to hear it again. I love you, he confirmed. Inconveniently, irrationally, completely. And if you need more time, if this is too much too fast, I'll wait. But I won't pretend anymore that this is anything less than what it is. I looked around the room, at the council members watching with various degrees of skepticism and interest, at Dmitri's smug expression, certain he'd cornered us, at Margot's barely concealed fury, at Agnese, standing in the doorway with tears in her eyes and hope on her face. Then I looked back at Severo, at the vulnerability he was showing me despite everything it cost him. I don't need more time, I said. I need a witness and someone authorized to perform marriages. His eyes widened. You're sure? I've been sure for days, I told him, echoing my words from the warehouse. I was just waiting for you to catch up. 2 hours later, we stood in the same private room, now rearranged to accommodate a hastily organized ceremony. The council had produced a judge they trusted, the paperwork had been prepared, and Agnese had somehow procured flowers and champagne. Camilla stood beside me as my witness, Severo having sent Yuri to collect her with explicit instructions to explain everything on the way. She'd arrived with her eyes wide and slightly panicked. But when I'd asked if she was okay with this, she'd hugged me tight and whispered, Mom would have loved him. I do too. That more than anything had solidified my certainty. Now, with the council members and far too many witnesses for such an intimate moment, I stood facing Severo and promised him forever. I, Elena Reyes, take you, Severo Morozov, to be my lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and health, until death do us part. His hands trembled slightly as he slid the ring on my finger. A simple platinum band he'd somehow produced, promising me we'd choose a proper one together later. I, Severo Morozov, take you, Elena Reyes, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to protect you, to cherish you, to trust you with truths I've shared with no one else. I promise to be worthy of the faith you've shown me, to never take for granted the gift of your love, and I promise that what began as deception will become the most honest thing I've ever done. When the judge pronounced us married and told Severo he could kiss his bride, he cupped my face with both hands, his thumbs brushing away tears I hadn't realized were falling. "Thank you," he whispered against my lips, "for taking a chance on a broken man." "You're not broken," I whispered back. "Just careful, and I happen to like careful." The kiss that followed was witnessed by far too many people, but I didn't care. Because Severo was kissing me like I was precious, like I was his, like I was everything he'd been afraid to want but couldn't live without anymore. When we finally broke apart, the room erupted in applause. Even some of the council members were smiling. Dmitri stood abruptly, his face mottled with rage. "This proves nothing. This is still manipulation. Enough." The eldest council member's voice cut through Dmitri's protests. "Severo Morozov and Elena Reyes are legally married. Whatever the initial circumstances, they have demonstrated genuine feeling and commitment. The matter is settled." He turned to Dmitri. "Your attempt to force an alliance through accusation and intimidation has failed. Further pursuit of this matter will be viewed as harassment and dealt with accordingly. I suggest you accept defeat gracefully." Dmitri's mouth worked soundlessly for a moment before he stormed from the room, Margot trailing behind him with a final venomous look at both of us. After the council dispersed and the room emptied, it was just Severo, me, Camila, Agnesi, and Yuri remaining. "Well," Agnesi said, her eyes bright with tears and laughter, "that wasn't how I imagined my son's wedding. But I can't say I'm disappointed with the outcome." "You knew this would happen," Severo accused gently. "When you hired Elena that first night, you knew somehow." "I knew you needed someone real," she corrected. "Someone who would see past your armor to the good man underneath. Elena did that. Everything else was simply you two figuring out what I already knew." Camilla moved to hug me. "So, I guess this means Severo's really my brother now?" "I guess it does," I said, watching Severo's expression soften as he looked at my sister. "Which means," he said to Camilla, "you're stuck with me too. Fair warning, I'm overprotective, and I have very strong opinions about your education and future." "As long as those opinions include funding said education, I think I can deal with it," she replied with a grin. He laughed, the sound free and genuine in a way I'd never heard before. "I think we'll get along fine, little sister." That evening, after Camilla had been driven home by Yuri and Agnesi had finally stopped fussing over us and retired to her own quarters, Severo and I stood on the terrace of the main house, looking out over the city lights. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. "I know today was insane. Getting married in front of the council, making it legal before we'd even had time to process what we were to each other." "I'm more than okay," I assured him. "Are you? This morning you were my fake fiancé. Tonight you're my husband. That's a lot of change in one day." He pulled me closer, wrapping his arms around me from behind. "This morning I was lying to everyone, including myself, about what you meant to me. Tonight, I'm married to the woman I love and free of the obligations that have been suffocating me for years. I'd say that's an excellent trade." I leaned back against him, marveling at how safe I felt in his arms. "Your mother was right, you know, about needing someone real. She's always right. It's infuriating." I felt him smile against my hair. "But yes, she was. I'd forgotten what it felt like to be honest with someone, to let them see the parts of me I keep hidden. You gave me that back, Elena. You gave me permission to be human again. You were always human, I corrected. You just convinced yourself you couldn't afford to be. And now? Now you have someone to be human with, I said. Someone who knows the worst of you and loves you anyway. Someone who will call you on your bullshit when you start building those walls again. That sounds exhausting for you, he observed. Probably, I agreed. But I signed up for it anyway, in front of witnesses, with legal documentation. His arms tightened around me. No regrets? I turned in his embrace to face him. Not a single one. You? Only that I didn't meet you sooner, he replied. That I wasted so many years alone when I could have been looking for you. You weren't ready for me sooner, I said. And I wasn't ready for you. We met exactly when we needed to. He kissed me, soft and sweet and full of promise. So what happens now, Mrs. Morozov? The name sent a thrill through me. Now we figure out what our real life looks like. Without pretending, without strategy, without council meetings and fake engagements. Just us, he agreed. Just us, I confirmed. And Camila and Agnesi and whoever else ends up in our orbit. But at the center, it's us. Real, honest, occasionally messy, completely imperfect us. I think I can live with that, Severo said, pulling me back against him as we looked out over the city that had brought us together in the most unlikely way. In fact, I think it's the only thing I want to live with. We stood there for a long time, wrapped in each other, and the quiet certainty that what we had was worth every risk, every complication, every moment of doubt that had brought us to this point. I'd walked into a hotel bar 6 weeks ago, with nothing but debts and desperation. I was leaving with a husband, a family, and a future I'd never imagined possible. Love, it turned out, was the most strategic move I'd ever made.